Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mitch Taco Bell. I'm your host with Tall Tales with Taco. As you can see, this is not my normal setting, so I want to apologize if the internet freezes or anything happens technology-wise. There was a little issue in our neighborhood. The AT&T guys are laying fiber, and I think they knocked out the other folks' competition's internet. So had to improvise, adapt, overcome, bug out, and go to my parents' house. Thank God they live 4 miles away for this interview, which I don't think you want to miss. So I was very excited about getting Senator Brian Birdwell on the show. Years ago, I was the Emcee down in Granbury for a Veterans Day event, and I was able to hear him as a guest speaker, and I was blown away. The power of God, the power of believing and overcoming such a huge obstacle as surviving the severe burns that he incurred during 9/11 was awe-inspiring. And I ran into him again at another event, and I said, "Sir, I don't know if you remember me, but I really want to talk to you about that day and your experience and just your life, because it's an impressive deal." And without further ado, I'd like to bring on Senator Brian Birdwell. Sir, how are you?
I am doing great, Taco. Hoorah, reporting for duty. So doing all right.
Well, once again, it's one of those. I can't believe that this happened to me. Internet goes out 5 minutes before we go doing our test run, and I'm like texting Heath, Dickey. Oh, by the way, is he part of the Dickey family of Fort Worth?
No, I don't. Maybe related. I've never asked him if he's part of the barbecue, but he's my chief of staff. So he lives in down in the Austin area, and he's my chief of staff in the Austin Capitol office. So.
Well, he did a great job. I sent an email, and right away he goes, "Oh, Senator's in the green room waiting for you." And I'm like, "I'll be there in 10 minutes." So, sir, thanks again. It's important that we never, ever forget the moments that changed this country. And, going all the way back, you're just a few years older than I am. You proudly joined the Army. You never expect a World War II Japanese Pearl Harbor sneak attack like we experienced, which just totally changed our careers at that point. But go back. How you started? You were in the Army. What year did you join the Army?
I was commissioned in 1984 through the ROTC program at Lamar down in Beaumont, and so I was the only commissionee that day that was both graduating and being commissioned. So I had graduation that morning, commissioning that afternoon, and then was on the road back to Fort Worth that night, and the next morning on my way to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. So about 24 hours after commissioning, I'm at beautiful Fort Sill, Oklahoma for Field Artillery School. Yes, sir. For Field
Queen
Artillery.
of Battles, right?
Yes, sir. Well, it's the AT&T weapon system. Long distance is the next best thing to being there, kind of thing. And so, so I came in May of '84, and a lot of different duty assignments that happy to talk about if you wish, but did everything in my power to try to not get assigned to the Pentagon, because it has such a reputation for being a building with a lot of dungeons that lieutenant colonels get buried in. And but Lord knew what he was doing, Mitch. Because I actually had an assignment to West Point to go be the deputy director for logistics on the installation staff. And a couple of weeks later, and Mel and I were looking forward to that. A couple of weeks later, Branch came back, said, "Nope, you're not going to do that now." But I ended up with a great boss in General Van Antwerp and Colonel Schambach. About 9 months after I'd arrived, I get pulled up to the front office. Our staff director at the ACSIM, the Assistant Chief of Staff for Installation Management, basically is the city managers on the Army staff for everything that makes an Army installation, just like a Marine installation, its own city. Utilities, environment, housing, recreation, family, all that stuff. And I got pulled up to be the aide to the deputy. General Van Antwerp was our principal, and Jan Minnig, an SCS 5, was our deputy, and I got pulled up to be her aide. And so my tag team aide was a full colonel, Colonel Williams, and he was General Van Antwerp's aide. I was Miss Minnig's aide, and And the morning of September 11th, Colonel Williams took General Antwerp, Miss Menig, over to the Doubletree for the conference that our staff director was hosting. All the garrison commanders from around the world had come into DC and so it was just Sandy, Cheryl, and myself settling in for what we expected to be a slow day, and turned out to not be such a slow day. So, like you said,
You and I were kind of talking about it in the morning as a commercial airline pilot. I had left 3 days prior, so I left on Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Saturday, and I did the shuttle between LaGuardia and Toronto. So that was my job. I would fly Dallas Love to LaGuardia on this really fancy F-100 that they had competition against Southwest and some other upstart. I can't even remember. They're gone.
Yeah.
And then we went up there, and then we would get the regular airplane. We would do the shuttle. So all day long, you sit there and fly. And when you come back over from Toronto to land at LaGuardia, they would fly you down almost from the north of LaGuardia, turn right, go over the Central Park, and then down the river where the Hudson, where Sully landed. Then you fly around the end of the World Trade Center, and you come back and land north. Well, that I was doing that three times a day, and I get home and I'm at my wife's. I'm in sleeping, and Tuesday morning, my wife calls numerous times, and I wake up and she goes, "Mitchell, turn the TV on. They say an American Airlines jet hit the World Trade Center." I'm like, no way. I mean, because high pressure system, clear in a million VFR. There's no way you can not hit the World Trade Center. You would have to intentionally do it, right? And not hit. That sounded wrong. There was no way that you could, not miss that thing. It was just there. So I turned the TV on and I'm watching the smoke billowing out and all the debris and papers and stuff flying out. And I'm going, 172 wouldn't do that kind of damage. Surely it wasn't American. And they're saying, yeah, an American Airlines jet hit. And a couple minutes go by and I get on the computer and I pull up the crew list, and I was still able to see the crew that was on that. They hadn't locked it out yet. And then minutes later, it gets locked out. And about that time, I see United 175 hit the South Tower. And so I'm on like a forum with a bunch of other aviators, and we start, hey, everybody okay? Everyone, all you 75, 76 guys, all you guys okay? All Navy, Marine, and some Air Force guys. And so we started getting hits back, and before they'd locked out United, they were able to pull up the crew, and the FO was Mike Horrocks, who I served with for 3 years at Cherry Point at 252. And so, that so long ago, I look at that, how it changed us. But as I put the uniform back on to go drive back in and move airplanes or do stuff at the airport, I'm listening, and then you guys were attacked.
Yeah.
And then Pennsylvania. So just a horrible day that somebody would utilize our way of life to kill so many civilians in the back and the people on the ground. And you all lost 115 that day and 10 contractors.
Well, on total, we lost 184, and that number does not include the terrorists. So you had 59 on the aircraft and 125 in the building. And had that been the only attack that day, that would have eclipsed, and not that you like measuring casualties, but that was a little more than the Oklahoma City bombing, other things. And that just gives you a size and scope. You had mentioned Pearl Harbor, either in our pre-interview or in this one. And there's so many parallels to the Pearl Harbor aspect, because the World Trade Center is like the Arizona, in that it's the largest loss of life in the shortest period of time. The Arizona sinks in 9 minutes because that bomb penetrates the forward magazine, and all that powder and high explosive that ship's supposed to, shoot out the tubes, it cuts the ship in half.
Right.
And so in 9 minutes, that thing sunk. So the World Trade Center, taking both towers, together in an hour and a half, from first impact to second collapse, you've got an hour and a half, 2 hours, nearly 3,000 people die. The Pentagon is more akin to the Nevada. She takes a beating, and like the Nevada at Pearl Harbor, she gets underway. The Pentagon remains an active work location. Secretary Rumsfeld, says we're gonna keep working, and 2.5 years after Pearl Harbor, the Nevada is in the Atlantic providing shore bombardment for the D-Day invasion.
That's
and
amazing.
So in many respects, it's similar in the sense that we'll take a beating. What's that old commercial? Takes a licking and keeps on
Takes a licking and keeps on ticking.
Whatever that
Timex,
watch
right?
was, and then Flight 93, if you remember for those youngsters out there watching, there's a great classic out there called Tora, Tora, Tora. And you've got the aircraft that are dispersed around the various islands, and two American pilots get in the air during the attack on Pearl Harbor when none others do. And very similar to Flight 93, where the passengers on that aircraft know that the odds of us surviving here are extremely slim.
Yep.
But the only way for us to potentially survive is to fight back. So similar to those two American pilots that actually both survive, that get in their aircraft and start shooting down Japanese aircraft so that their bomb loads don't make it to either, the harbor or the airfields or the fuel depots or whatever they were going to attack. Those individuals on Flight 93 make sure that fourth aircraft doesn't get to its destination, which we think is the capital. That's those parallels to valor, service, risk, loss of life that September 11th had with Pearl Harbor. I mean, just in so many ways.
Yeah, and after that, and the other thing would be the unity of the country.
Yeah,
I've never seen the country more cohesive and brought together. Unity is a good word, whereas now we're so divisive. But back then and after World War II, everyone dropped whatever the problems were. Let's work together, and we're going to take these guys on. When you watch this, you were watching that on the television in your office, right?
That's correct. When Sandy, one of my two colleagues, Sandy and Cheryl, were with me that day, the three of us were holding the fort down while the general, the SES, and Colonel Williams were over at the DoubleTree across from the Pentagon. Sandy's daughter, Sam, worked in New York, called her mom, said, "Hey, Mom, kind of like, your wife, saying, turn on the TV, Sandy's daughter calls, says, turn on the TV. Sandy gets off the phone, and she sits a couple of desks down the window row from me. And she says, my daughter Sam just called and said, plane hit the World Trade Center. So Cheryl, Sandy, and I go into Miss Minig's office. I turn the TV on. I don't remember what network it was, but just like you see the North Tower, the one with the antenna mast, the first tower hit, huge gaping hole, black smoke pouring out of that thing, and just sitting there going, this doesn't smell right. As beautiful, like you said, as beautiful weather day as it was in the Northeast, what type of mechanical malfunction happened at either approach or takeoff at just a precise timing that the pilot couldn't avoid hitting, because like when Sullenberger, Sully put that thing out in the Hudson. If I've got a catastrophic failure, I know that pilot's going to do everything in his power, that even if I'm a goner, I'm going to do everything in my power not to hit anything on the ground. And the odds of that, to hit that tower so square on. Yep. That little voice in the back, the news media is saying it's an accident, but there's that voice in the back of our head going, this doesn't smell right, folks. Yeah. Oh yeah. And then we watch your colleagues' plane crash shortly thereafter on live TV, and that would confirmed that neither were accidents.
Did they ever come out with I always wondered about that. Did they ever come out with alarms or the bighorn going off in the Pentagon going, battle stations? Anybody think about
After
that?
I'm sure there were. Here's the reality of the staff director that I worked in. We're basically the city managers, so we're
Right.
not we're not the guy. We're not at the
Intel
tip of the
cell.
spear. We're not. Well, the military's always had an outward focus of external threats, not not a hijacking threat per se.
Mhm.
And so I'm sure there were people when the first crash occurs, as you're watching this event unfold, whether it's the Army Operations Center, the Navy Operations Center, the Air Force, or the National Command Center, various things are happening or starting to turn the attention of our military. But in my staff directorate, it was quiet. The only alarms that went off were after impact, and those were the fire alarms.
Right.
About evacuating the building because of when a fire gets started with a 3,000 gallon, Jet A crashing into your building, because that's about what was left on the aircraft. That was about what was left on the aircraft. People are getting out of the building and as quickly as they can. And you can see where the red circle is. That's the crash site, and the corridors are what are the spokes that connect the rings. You see
Mhm.
immediately to the right of the red circle, Mitch, that line that runs from the E ring, which is the outer ring, to the A ring, which is the inner ring that connects to the courtyard. And
Mhm.
you see the one directly above it is also burned. That's the roof of the Pentagon has been burned out there. And so while the Pentagon's huge and there were portions of the building that didn't evacuate, that whole side is having to get out of the building because of the danger of the fire, the smoke, and the like.
Right. Yeah. So when this thing, did you actually get when you were standing there? Did you get to witness the airplane and see it coming in, or was it
No,
too fast? Or
I heard its impact. I mean, and that when you hear the aircraft, it's already past you because you're
right.
hearing the engine report coming out the back end. There was no alarm that we were next or anything about getting out of the building because we knew something was coming. There was none of that.
Mhm.
I just simply was coming out of the men's restroom, returning back to the office, and then you hear the impact, and in that nanosecond, I thought bomb because the building was getting remodeled
Mhm.
to meet, American Disability Code. We didn't have a sprinkler system in the new part of the building that we had just occupied. We had moved from Wedge 2 to Wedge 1. We'd only been in that new part of the building for about 2 months.
Mhm.
And there were still other areas on that floor that were getting built, like the new snack bar, cafeteria, the various things but so you heard some construction sounds, but when you heard this, I mean, as an old artillery guy, and I mean, I was like, yeah, that's no construction sound. I thought bomb, and then in the next nanosecond, I'm, blown across the hallway in the corridor, set ablaze,
Mhm.
and begin the struggle for survival. And by Lord's grace, get out of the building and survive, which I should not have. I mean, the impact should have killed me as close as I was 15 to 20 yards from the nose of the aircraft, where it made penetration. Um, by the Lord's grace, and I say this not with it's to the Lord's credit, not to me being the toughest guy in the
Yeah.
building, but by the Lord's grace, I'm the only person in the E-ring at the crash site that survived.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I'm that close. If you go to the building, um, at the crash site, there's some diagrams of the building and that wedge and which people that deceased that day and where their bodies were recovered and which survived. If you can't
That
see it
photograph.
the previous photo you had that showed, yeah, the if you at the very bottom of that photo, no, the one that you just had up.
Whoops, hold on one second.
Yeah, go back to that one there. Well, that one works too. That one works too. That one works well. And if you see the fire truck that seems to be shooting its water foam into the actual crash site closest, there are two windows directly above it on the second floor. And then you see a gap. If you're moving to the left, you see a larger gap. And then you see the next bank of windows that looked recessed. That first window to the left that is recessed on the second floor to the left of the fire engine, that is my boss's office where I was watching the events unfold up, in New York with Sandy and Cheryl. And the window to the immediate left of that fourth window from where the building seems to be cut, in
a V, yeah,
with a knife on the left side, that fourth window on the second floor to the left of where the building's been sliced, that's my desk where my window was located. The window I'm in fact behind, if you draw a straight line down from the red cross on the helicopter and go down to the second floor, about half of that opening that's behind the highway signs, about half of it's below, and then half of it is got the bars of that highway sign. That first window that is still intact to the right of the collapse point, that's the window I'm behind at the time of impact.
Jeez.
Because I was coming back to the E-ring. The men's restroom is in the fourth quarter, right next to the elevator shaft. I'd come out. I was walking toward that window, and I'm about to, as you're looking out of the building toward the outside, I'm looking outward, and I'm about to turn right to go back through the crash site. So when I stepped out to go to the men's restroom, I stepped out of my office on the left side, walked through what would be the collapse point, what would be the impact site, and what eventually collapsed, walked through that, went up to the fourth quarter, turned left, and the men's restroom's just on the other side of the elevator there. Came out. I am walking back toward the outer wall and about to turn right to go back to the office on the left side of the crash site. And I'm right there behind that window on the right side when the plane makes impact.
So that, I don't know how many gallons of gas, aviation gas we had.
About 3,000. Based upon the FAA, when I went to the Hoover building for the FBI building for the NTSB's briefing on the crash, they said it's a 5,000 gallon 757, has 5,000 gallons of it's measured in pounds, but they said it's about 5,000 gallons. Based upon their takeoff, flying out over that intersection of West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, when they make the turnaround, the Honey Honger is the piloting hijacker, and I don't mean to give him any credit with those titles, but toggles off the transponder and then makes his way back to DC to crash the flight. They use about 2,000 gallons of that 5,000 load, and because they were on their way to San Francisco, I think.
Yeah,
and,
so full load going cross country.
Yeah, so it's a full load going cross country and crashed it into the building, and yeah.
And so when you woke up, fire, fumes,
well, I was never unconscious until I get to the emergency room at Georgetown. It does not bother me to tell this story, but this would be the time, depending upon how much detail you want, Mitch. If there are parents with their kids watching this, it's a pretty graphic.
We can make it PG and G,
okay.
whatever.
I mean,
whatever.
I'm not trying to be.
No. I mean,
it's a graphic. But I'm set ablaze, blown across the hallway. And there are three pains and emotions that I will experience in what seems to last an eternity.
Mm-hmm.
I was only on fire for probably 2 to 3 minutes, but that seemed like a lifetime.
Sure.
The first is the physical pain of the burns. I was burned on 60% of my body. 40% of me is third-degree burn. You know, my eye sockets have been rebuilt. The forehead, my ears are artificial cartilage with my own skin grafted over it. My hands, the webbing between the thumb and the index bone of the palm were burned together on both hands. Dr. Jordan had to go in, make incisions, pull the bone out, and then put grafts in there to give me something of an opposing thumb on each side. Right. Fingers had to be separated. The arms from fingertip to armpit are completely grafted circumferentially around both arms. Back, legs, I mean, just, you know. But the most immediate life-threatening injury wasn't the external burns, it's the internal. And that's the inhalation injury as I'm breathing in that aerosolized jet fuel. I mean, it's like going home and sticking your head in an oven at 300 degrees and breathing.
Right.
But instead of oxygen, you know, I'm breathing, you know, that slick, that, you know, it just
jet fuel's got a certain smell to it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it tastes like it smells. It tastes like it smells. So what's happening in my lungs is the body, you know, when you touch something hot and that blister forms,
yeah,
that's what's happening in my lungs. So fluid is gathering into my lungs because of the blistering that's occurred in my lungs. So while I'm quickly burning to death on the outside, I am slowly drowning to death on the inside.
Oh, I never would have thought of that. Yeah.
Well, they had to drain my I mean, they had to pump stuff out of my lungs. And I mean, it was, you know,
did they get you over to Georgetown right away?
It struck me as pretty quickly. Now,
right.
My sense of time and space is very distorted because even after, you know, because there's, if you want me to skip over some things, I will, but the sense of time and space in the hallway, that was an eternity.
Right.
And then getting out of the hallway seemed to be very slow. And then once I'm out of the hallway with first responders that are military folks, there's an Air Force doctor that Dr. Baxter will treat me. That all seemed to just happen lickety split.
And who were the guys that found you, that were able to pull you out?
There were four men: Bill McKinnon, Roy Wallace, John Davies, and Chuck Knobloch. And Bill McKinnon, I knew. Bill and I were classmates at Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth. Classmates at Leavenworth, not cellmates at Leavenworth. Let me make that clear to the audience. But so the four of them, in fact, Roy Wallace is the first one to me. Roy is a finance colonel in the DESPER's office, Deputy Chief Staff for Personnel's office on the Army G1 staff. And all four of them worked there in that office. They weren't looking for me personally, but they come out into the corridor. Remember, the corridor are the spokes that connect the rings. They come out of the B ring doors into the corridor because the crash happens in the E, D, and C rings. The plane never penetrates the B ring, but they move out into that corridor to try to get to the other rings because the rings are not connected at second, third, or fourth, fifth floor level. At first floor level, E, D, and C are, but B and A are completely separated from the other rings. So they move out into the corridor. And of course, when they come out, smoke is filling up the hallway. And Roy said it's one of the most gruesome things he's seen when he sees me walking out of the smoke, and I'm using the wall that I've been blown up against, that I've used to get up and stagger down the hallway, you know, I'm on my feet. Because look, the damage to your cochlea I
Right.
mean, an 80-ton bomb exploding. I mean, the fact that I even still have hearing, even though I've got, hearing aids and all the things that come with being 60 now. But
The concussion, though, it seems like you would be.
the concussion should have killed me. I mean,
Yeah.
it just, and all the things that were flying through the air when that explosion occurs, should have killed me. But like I said, the Lord's hands on me, because I didn't have any puncture wounds from any of that stuff.
That's amazing.
Absolutely. And so in my exhaustion of covering 25 to 30 yards with chunks hanging off the arms, my eyes are already, I can feel, I mean, when I get up and start to move, in fact, people might ask, well, how do I know which way to move? As I lay there in the floor waiting to die, that third pain and emotion that I dealt with was the permanency of death. I mean, I was laying there thinking about Mel and Matt,
Mm-hmm.
and how that was that morning when I'd said goodbye to them in Lorton was the last I was going to see them before they joined me in eternity. And as I lay there waiting for that feeling of the soul departing the body, it never came. And in my human frailty, I'm like, come on, Lord, let's get on with this thing. I was ready to, there's just no words in the English language to, that in scripture where it talks about the peace that passes all understanding,
Mm-hmm.
to go from the calamity of trying to survive and that struggle to live, because that was just absolute agony, burning to death, trying to get up, that survival instinct that says, try to survive, to come to that realization that you're dying, and you step over that line that says, okay, Lord, I got it. I've reconciled myself to my death.
Right.
And in that moment, you go from the calamity, the terror, the torment. I'm still burning, but you don't feel the physical pain because you're concentrating on the spiritual blessing.
Did the adrenaline kick in at all that says, I can do this now?
What?
I can do this. Adrenaline.
No. I mean, I was trying to get up, trying to, but because all I can see when the aircraft explodes and I'm blown across the hallway,
mm-hmm.
I'm not unconscious. I'm trying to get up, and all I can see in front of me is in the immediacy, there's an immediate arc of just yellow and orange
mm-hmm.
in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the outer periphery is just black. Because, the lights are out. I mean, all the, electrical, I mean, I am 15 to 20 yards from the nose of that aircraft hitting the building. I mean, the right engine goes in front of me. I mean, I don't know how to. Man,
yeah, I mean, you are right there.
Yeah.
You survived going off Niagara Falls. I don't know how.
Well, it's by the Lord's grace. But
yeah.
But so as I'm struggling to get up, come to that realization that, I screamed out, Jesus, I'm coming to see you. It wasn't, Lord, save me from this calamity. It was I had reconciled myself
mm-hmm.
to the death I was dying. But as I lay there waiting for that feeling of the soul departing the body, and it didn't come, because I was dealing with that permanency of death, that I was elated, that I was confident in my eternal destination with the Lord.
Right.
But I was sad in that I was departing Mel and Matt.
Yeah.
I opened my eyes, and in the distance, kind of like if you're a ship at sea, but you cannot see the bulb of the lighthouse, but you can see the reflection of the light off the surface of the water.
Mm-hmm.
You can't see the light bulbs because the smoke is just pouring down I mean, there's fire burning all around, but I can see the reflection of the light off the tile in the distance. And it's about 80 to 100 yards from the E-ring to the A-ring wall. And so I'm down between the D and the E. So I use the wall that I've been blown up against, and then I'm staggering out of the hallway, down the hallway with my hands against the wall, feet on the floor. So 4 points of contact, shuffling. The front of my shirt, my name tag, and my access badge are still connected, but are shriveled, and the name tag's melted. The access badge is shriveled up like a party balloon. You know, when you blow that thing
Yep.
out, it's, you know, it's shriveled up like that. There's blood all over the front of me. I'm skinned alive on the arms. My face is already beginning to swell because you can feel the pressure in the eyelids, because
Yeah.
my eyes are starting to kind of like the Rocky movie. You know, it didn't take me
Yep.
15 rounds with Apollo Creed, but that's what's happening.
Right.
My eyes are swelling. It's best way to say it is I am terribly indisposed. My belt and the front of my pants at the upper thigh are still intact, but because I laid there for some period of time face down burning, my back is burned away, the buttocks, the leg, you know, I have very little of my pants just hanging on me.
Sure.
And then I've got my shoes on, but the sock above the ankle where the leather starts, from where the leather ends from the heel up, the sock is gone above that. And so that's what Roy, Bill, Chuck, and John see when I come out of the smoke in the quarter. In my exhaustion of covering about 25, 30 yards in this condition I've described to you, I collapse in front of Roy, not just because of the exhaustion but it's also the relief of knowing I'm about to subordinate myself to whatever Bill, Roy, Chuck, and John do on my behalf.
Mm-hmm.
They will eventually, and it's graphic because this is not a place to tarry. We're about the C-ring door area when I collapse in front of Roy, and this is not a place to tarry and wait for medical care to get to me. In fact, the fire door, the facilities folks that manage the Pentagon's, you know, air conditioning and all, the fire door's already been closed. That can be remotely closed to seal the fire. So we're sealed in with the fire by the door, that it's like an accordion, you know, like a room divider.
Right.
But that door has sealed to seal the fire in, and it can only be opened by a fireman. So Bill, Roy, Chuck, and John, had they not come out into the hallway to get me, or to look for people and come across me, I would have either eventually gotten to that door, maybe not, but eventually gotten to the door and either died of smoke inhalation or died of my injuries before a fireman opens that door.
How'd you guys get the door open?
Well, we didn't, because when they came out the B-ring door, fortunately their badges still worked. So we went back through into their B-ring door area. Then they have a passageway that takes you to the A-ring, that they took that connects offices. It's like a little, I don't know, it's not a catwalk, but there's this little connecting thing that you can, and so they carried me through there. When they, picking me up was a gruesome experience, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. I experienced that in Iraq with our guys that were hit with IEDs.
Yeah. And well, when your body's that badly burned, I mean, things just peel, you know, flesh just comes right off. I mean, it's like, you know, skinning a fish. I mean, it just, you know, and
now,
so
did we have Emcee back then? The burn unit down at, did we have that burn unit back then?
It's no longer called Brook. It's now called the San Antonio Medical Center, because it's a joint facility now, like many things. But the Institute for Surgical Research is the burn unit at what used to be Brook Army Medical Center. They still operate. I did not go there for my care. I went to the regional burn unit in DC at the Washington Hospital Center, where the big hospital complex is up there off North Capitol and Irving Street, where the Veterans Affairs Hospital, the National Children's Hospital, there's a rehabilitative hospital, and then the Washington Hospital Center is where the burn unit was. And so there's a number of things, Mitch, that you can see the Lord's hand in designating my survival. Whether it was, you know, Bill, Roy, Chuck, and John just surviving the impact, Dr. Baxter and Colonel Davitt, the two Air Force personnel that would treat me initially. Colonel Baxter had a go bag with him, had morphine
Wow.
and in it. Because in fact, another tidbit, not that we knew this was coming, but it's how the Lord,
Yeah.
There are medical professionals that I don't know if you've been stationed in the Pentagon, but
No.
then you're blessed. But but there's a
Escape that.
pretty rigorous medical clinic called the Di Lorenzo Tricare Clinic in the building at the 8th quarter, at the E-ring and 8th quarter, first floor level. A lot of good stuff in there, but it's not a hospital, but it's a very rigorous clinic. But there are medical professionals in the Air Force Surgeon General's office, the Army Surgeon General's office, that are not practicing physicians, but they're now staff planners and staff management officers for medical functions in each of the services.
Mm-hmm.
And because that building is so big, the summer before, maybe about 8 months before September 11th, the building managers did and this is going to really rock your world here. They did an emergency event where the smaller regional aircraft that fly into Reagan, the big ones, you have to fly over the river and you make that wider U-turn.
Right.
But the regional ones, there's that one
runway 15. Yeah.
That takes you toward the river, and you go right over the Pentagon.
Yep.
And then right over Highway 1, and then cross that main runway where all the 757s and everything take off, and the regional jets use that other one. Well, they'd use that as the scenario of an aircraft coming in for landing, crashes into the Pentagon.
What are we going to do?
What are we going to do? And one of the things they figured out is, depending upon where this thing crashed, the closest medical people may be way on the other side of the building. And hey, why don't we give, go bags? Why don't we give medical bags to all these doctors that are on these Surgeon General staffs?
Yeah.
Because the ambulances the ambulances that serve the Pentagon are like the extended golf cart, that used to bring the relief pitcher out from the bullpen.
Sure. Yeah.
Except it can, instead of it being a relief pitcher, it can hold a gurney with a nurse sitting next to it, like in the back of a medevac helicopter.
Right.
And so Dr. Baxter has his go bag with him. So I get morphine, I get an IV, and then I'll eventually be taken to Georgetown. There's so many miracles. Just so many things that I'm skipping over there, Mitch. But I get to Georgetown, and I'm the only casualty taken to Georgetown, and that's seminal in the Lord's plan for my life, because not only do I have that entire hospital's undivided attention, because they're waiting my belief is they are the closest hospital to the Pentagon. Now, there's a lot of great hospitals immediately around, in the DC area, but I'm the only casualty taken to Georgetown. And it's seminal, not just because I have their undivided attention, but the attending physician at Georgetown's emergency room, it's a teaching hospital, is Dr. Michael Williams. And Dr. Williams spent, before he came to Georgetown, to be a teaching instructor for, train wrecks, how to deal with train wrecks. He spent 2 years in a trauma fellowship learning how to be a train wreck doctor over at the Washington Hospital Center under the direction of Marion Jordan and James Jang. Dr. Jordan was the director of the burn unit. Dr. Jang is chief of research. So from all those hospitals in DC, I've got the third best burn doctor in the DC area available to me, because what's going to happen here is normally in an emergency room, it's airway, breathing, circulation. Once those three are stabilized, you're evacuated to specialized care. But because right after the Flight 77 is crashed into the Pentagon, Vice President Cheney will tell Secretary of Transportation Mineta to shut down all airspace in the United States, and that includes medevac helicopter. Nothing's flying. Wow. So when I arrive at Georgetown in the back of that Ford Expedition, Dr. DeSimone is outside the emergency room with a triage team, because they can see the smoke pouring out. It is coming over.
Did they pack up and head over to the Pentagon, or Were they waiting
No,
for
no,
the
no.
mass cash?
They stayed at Georgetown and waiting for whatever's going to come, because they're the
Right.
closest hospital to my knowledge, they're the closest hospital right across the river in DC from the Pentagon. I mean, right through Roslyn, right
But you
into.
got, yeah, you got Arlington Hospital off of 16th and Washington Boulevard.
Yeah, and you got a Nova Fairfax. You've got,
Yeah.
so there's a bunch of hospitals there. But so Dr. DeSimone and his team are waiting to do the triage. The Ford pulls up with me. He looks at me and says, "I don't need to triage him. Get him inside because he's critical." I mean, because I am laying there.
Do
I
they
mean,
have you
look,
on a stretcher, or did they
I was on a
slowly?
I was on a body board because that was the only way to really pick me up. I mean, I'm not trying to be graphic for the sake of gratuitousness, but when I come out of that hallway, it's like the steak you've just taken off the grill,
Yeah.
and people can feel the heat coming off of me.
Right.
And as my body is cooling, it is solidifying. It is becoming stiff.
Yeah.
So they got me on a body board, and then when they get me out into the parking lot to put me in the back of that Ford, they're using the body board, and I'm laying on the body board when they put me in the in the back of the Ford, and then they're using that body board to put me onto the gurney when they wheel me into the emergency room.
Now, was this somebody's POV that said, "Throw him in here,
Yep.
let's go"?
Captain Wineland, when I got out, because initially the ambulance, the golf cart that took me from the intersection of the 5th and 6th corridor at the A-ring is where I was triaged.
Mm-hmm.
They take me out to that 8th corridor where the DiLorenzo clinic is.
Mm-hmm.
I get another IV, and they're waiting for, is an ambulance coming? And one of the ladies there says, "This gentleman can't wait for an ambulance. He's got to go now.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can find somebody that's in their vehicle in the parking lot." And that's when they find Captain Wineland. That was his actual first day at the Pentagon. He had reported for duty. He was, he had arrived to sign in and get, badge, and
So he's in
they
his dress uniform. Yeah.
Yeah, he's in his Class A's. They throw everything in the back of his Ford out, throw me in. One of my fellow coworkers, Major John Collison, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about John here. When Dr. Baxter treats me, I have a wonderful lady from the Navy, Natalie Ogletree. We pray together.
Mm-hmm.
And then Dr. Baxter, he takes my shoes off to treat me. Because, I mean, that's how charred and blackened I am. It's either my own blood or the actual scorching of my flesh, that he takes my shoes off and what's left of my sock that was underneath the leather that has not been burned. And so he uses the veins on the tops of my feet to put the morphine in the right foot. He puts the IV in the left. There are people coming down from the 4th, 5th floors, jumping over us. I mean, you can imagine what it's like to try to put an IV in under duress already. And in that amount of chaos with the fire alarm going off.
Right.
He and Colonel Davitt did a fabulous bang up job.
Yeah.
But I'm praying they're sticking me with needles, but I don't feel it because, that's pretty insignificant to, I'm praying with Natalie. She's doing all the speaking because it's very hard for me to speak I got crap coming out of my lungs and everything's just scorched down the esophagus, the air,
It's amazing
airway.
you didn't pass out.
I've had some athletes that have told me that that level of pain, I should have passed out. I was certainly in shock. I was trembling and I couldn't control it. I'll let your imagination paint, you and the listeners paint what that looks like. Cause I don't have control of other physical faculties either.
Right.
And so, I get to Georgetown. Dr. Williams is the attending physician. And when they wheel me in, he says, Colonel Birdwell, we're going to do the best that we possibly can for you. but when they loaded me in the back of that Ford in the north parking lot, Dr. Baxter had put a toe tag that said at what time and how much morphine and the IV and at what time it was done, and had my name on it.
Mm-hmm.
John is helping load me. He doesn't have any idea who I am because I am
So
unrecognized. I'm so burned, I'm unrecognized. I mean, they are putting a
charred
body
Yep.
that's alive on this in the back of this Ford. And just by the Lord's grace, John, looks at the toe tag, and Birdwell is not a common name in the building. And he's like, oh my God. John jumps in the back to go with me. Jill Hyson is the nurse that goes with me. She works at Georgetown. She's an Air Force nurse that's on her 2 weeks of annual training. And so she normally works at Georgetown. Mm-hmm. So that's the only hospital she knows how to get to. Captain Wineland is somewhere on the NASCAR circuit. It wasn't a plane that nearly killed me, but the ride to we're driving over. God. I mean, traffic is, as you can imagine.
Yep.
And so by the Lord's grace, after Dr. Williams says we're going to do the best we can, I do two things. And I'm conscious through all this, Mitch. And that's how I know it so well. But and getting to talk to the people that told me some of these details as well after, that were part of this treatment. But when I get wheeled in, it's like a battle drill, voice commands, intensity, but no chaos. Mm-hmm. And one of the things they're saying is, what jewelry does he have on? Because normally if it's a ring or a bracelet, a necklace, if that's the part of the body burned, as the body swells, that jewelry becomes a tourniquet.
Yeah.
Because as the pressure in the body builds, it'll begin to collapse blood flow.
What did you have a metal watch, or did you have?
No, I didn't have a watch. I just had my wedding ring. And they normally, in a burn scenario, normally jewelry is cut off of the burn survivor. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want the wedding ring destroyed. There was never an opportunity to call Mel. Eventually Judith, the lady from the Navy, her husband eventually calls Mel and tells her I'm at Georgetown. And that's how we make that link up. And how Mel gets there before I get moved from Georgetown to the Washington Hospital Center. And that's its own interview too. I mean, it took a couple hours to get there, and that's its own traumatic experience for Mel to get linked up to me.
They were able to get the ring off?
And they did. Now my hands look like blackened hot dogs that are extending from a overdone steak.
Yeah.
And, gold melts somewhere about 600, 700 degrees, but the human body melts long before that. And Judith Rogers was one of the nurses that answered the all hands on deck call at the Georgetown emergency room. She's actually an OBGYN nurse. And when the hospital said, hey, mass casualty event, if you are not actively engaged with a current patient, report to the emergency room, everybody getting triage or whatever.
Yep.
And Judith with her ring, so I asked that I wanted the wedding ring taken off. Judith reaches for the ring. She gives it a slight tug and then functionally degloves the finger you can see the exposed bone, blood's pouring out of the hand because my body is solidified and now she's broken that. And so now it's like the paraffin treatment, when you stick your hand in the hot wax, it's liquid. And then when you take it out and it cools, it solidifies. She's basically just pulled all the wax off my index finger or my ring.
Should have cut it.
No. And so John Collison, my buddy that was jumped in the back with me, is in the emergency room there. He is standing behind Judith and Dr. Williams. Mm-hmm. And I said, give that to John, and I told John, said, give that to Mel and tell her that I loved her. And then I asked for the hospital chaplain. Chaplain Cirillo comes to the right-hand side, and she just leads that prayer that says, okay, Lord, if you brought Brian here under your direction as the great physician, Dr. Williams and the team here, Brian survives, we'll salute and move out with that mission. But if you brought Brian here under the care and compassion of his fellow Americans to quietly call him into eternity, I mean, that's not word for word the prayer, because I don't remember word for word, but that's the functional ask in the prayer.
Yeah.
That I'm recognizing that the great physician's in charge of my life here and my eternity, should he call me. And it's your decision, Lord, whether I live or die.
Yeah.
And with that, I mean, the thing that I'm getting a little emotional, Mitch, but
yeah,
the thing that I remember most vividly of that entire, from, crash to this point, is I remember just so vividly seeing that mask. They're putting the mask over the nose and with the cannulas or whatever's in that mask, covering the nose and the mouth. And I remember feeling the beginning of the tilting of the head back to intubate me. And somewhere in there, I'm rendered unconscious. I don't know how much they had to give me, given, they're sedating me through the lungs.
Yep.
Because my lungs are still processing oxygen, but I'm also, correct.
Yeah.
I mean,
exploding
days
water
later,
right?
Days later in ICU, they would actually, through the trach at the Washington Hospital, at the burn unit, they'd actually send this suction tube down the trach it would hurt, not because it's going down my trach, but it's forcing the coughing instinct.
Mm-hmm.
And with so much of my torso burned, that exertion of the cough is just agonizing to my chest area because of the burns to the back. But what it looks like black cotton candy that they're sucking out of my lungs. And
wow. How many other survivors were as burned as you?
There were a total of 9 of us, and probably 3 worse than me. I was probably in the middle. Juan Cruz had to have cornea transplants. His facial area was burned. His eyes were not actually burned, but because of the eyelid burns he had, he could not close. He didn't blink for about 3 hours between the time of the attack and getting to medical care. And so his corneas dried out, and he had to have cornea transplants. Louise Kurtz was the most badly injured. Had to have her hands amputated, because the extremities, what usually happens is it's not because the burns per se require amputation. It's that the burns were deep enough that there's no blood flow to the extremities of either. It's kind of like frostbite. That'll be the first place amputated, because there's not enough blood flow there to heal, to recover from the injury. So Louise was Louise Kurtz. She did survive.
Oh, she? Okay.
She did survive. Of course, Juan survived, and then Lieutenant Kevin Schaefer. He and I were about the same. He had a worse inhalation injury than I did. I had aerosolized, but he was in the Navy Operations Center, and was the only of the 40 people in there. He was the only one that survived. He got blown out the exit hole where the aircraft doesn't come through, but it blows a hole in the wall between this. There's a service road between the C and the B ring. So where that hole is blown out, the B ring, there's no penetration. So that's where the cessation of the wreck occurs, and it blows him out of that. He's the only guy in the Navy Operations Center that survives, but he's in the C ring. But he actually has, he's got actual gas in his lungs, not aerosolized. He's got liquid gas
Oh
I
my
mean,
God. Yeah.
he's got
Yeah.
pneumonia, but instead of it being water, it's gas
Right.
in his lungs. And they actually have to put him on a rotating bed. Dr. Jordan has to do a surgical tube, puncture the lung on both sides, and then they rotate his bed so that he drains on one side and he's breathing out of the other lung while the other one's draining. And then they'd rotate the bed to the other side to drain the other lung. And they did that for a couple of days.
Was this, do you have the rubber beds where you would just be laying there, no sheet, no nothing? I mean, the temperature turned up and they had the rubber beds down in Emcee. I went to go visit.
No, that at this point, I mean, this is 21 years ago. At this point, they're still using a tank for cleaning. So you're dipped in like the old trainer's bathtub,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
when you're in playing football in high school,
Yeah.
they lower you into that vat. I'm on a regular bed that's a pad in my ICU room, but there's no such, there's no pain-free day in the burn unit.
How do you feel now? I mean, how is it?
I feel great. I mean, I'm, I have range of motion limitations, and there's things I can't feel because with third-degree burns, when you're grafted, with third-degree burns, you lose the three, the dermis, epidermis, and subcutaneous level of skin, and the subcutaneous level of skin is what is next to the muscle, and your skin rolls over that muscle because there's this slick, fatty bottom to that subcutaneous level. But the subcutaneous level is where the sweat gland, the hair follicle are all anchored. So with a third-degree burn, I've got no hair, on the arm. It's all, grafted skin. So when they take a graft, they're shaving part of you. And this is what makes large amounts percentage burn so bad is it's not just that you have so much area you may have to graft, but you also have so little area to go grab grafts from.
Right.
And so my lower abdomen is where they got most of my grafts. But when they shave that off with the dermatome, it's like a cheese slicer in the shape of a computer mouse. And they shave that off of you. And then they run it through a perforator so that a 1 square of shaving can now cover 2 square inches. And then they staple it to you. But when they take that off, it's basically a second-degree burn. They're only taking the dermis and epidermis level of skin off of you to close you up on what's been burned. And so the grafted skin doesn't roll over my muscles. The hair follicle, none of that sweat gland, none of that moves with that graft. So
how many operations did you have to go through?
For specifically directly related to September 11th, 39, but with other things, I've actually been to the operating room now 52 times.
Wow, boss.
So some of it for eye, cataract, they put the lens in. I've had, 2 eye surgeries. I've had other, I've had back surgery. I've had stents put in back on Christmas Day.
Mm-hmm.
So the Lord's still got plenty of things for me to do, Mitch. So.
Well, you look great. So, all right. So you survive all this 4 years of recovery. When did you decide, you know what, I'm going to do this with my life? Or was there a point that you were sitting around feeling bad for yourself, but what am I going to do? Or
no, there were the manner in which you phrased the question is 2 different time frames, because the hardest, other than the life or death and saying goodbye to my wife and son, the hardest day emotionally was when I got out of ICU. Because in ICU, I mean, in a burn unit ICU, the angel of death is standing in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And once I get out of ICU, the question of life or death, because look, in ICU, I begged for the Lord to finish it, let's just get this over with. I want my physical agony, and I want Mel and Matt's emotion of
Yes.
watching me go through this to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the Lord, the Lord's ways are not our ways, and his thinking is higher than ours. I survived. I come out of ICU, but now I'm dealing with what every soldier that survives lives with, and that's how am I going to care for my family? How am I going to be a father to my kids? What's life going to be like? I mean, that 4 years was a long 4 years getting
And did
put back
they
together.
keep you on active duty for that?
I did. Mel's a great little battle general. She made sure they didn't retire me. The Army and the Army's motivation was righteous in that at the time the laws were structured that it's a better financial circumstance to be medically retired. Well, there's a problem with that. First, this was a circumstance where normally the soldier's in theater, the military's making that decision, the spouse is not in theater. Well, Mel gets to me before the Army does, because she gets to Georgetown. Because when people are evacuating the building, it's not under here's the dust off. We're now going to go to the MASH. We're now going to, like in theater where you're getting evacuated through the various levels of medical care back to Landstuhl or in Europe or Madigan at Fort Lewis or Tripler in Hawaii if you're in the Pacific Theater. It's just get in the vehicle, get to the hospital. I'm now in a civilian hospital under their care. Dr. Jordan's retired Navy, and he knows what the military is doing here with medical retirement. Here's the thing that people need to understand. The real difficult decision Mel had in front of her was not because did I want to be a soldier or not, though she made the decision. She didn't want to tell me I was retired.
Mm-hmm.
But she's basically, because of the way the laws were structured, she's being asked to bet our family's financial solvency against my life. If she medically retires me and I die, that's the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
But if she medically retires me and I survive, my pay gets cut in half because I'm now medically retired.
Right.
I get to pay the co-pays on what it turns out to be 3.5 months, but an unknown hospital stay and all the things that come with that. I get to pay the co-pays for that because I'm now in a medical retired status I lose BAQ. I lose so how's she going to survive and live on, no BAQ in the DC housing market?
Large,
Yeah.
And where did you guys live at the time?
We lived in Lorton in a townhome at the time. Mm-hmm. If she doesn't medically retire me and I decease, then she only gets the death benefit related with SGLI. She doesn't receive the medical retirement, because if I medically retired and then die, she keeps that medical retirement, in perpetuity till her death.
Sure.
So the Army's motivation was right. The manner in which they handled it was atrocious, but given all the things going on, we're at peace with the Army here. But that was a brutal decision that Mel had some help from our first folks at First Command Financial that helped dig into some of those details, because the Army was pressing her to make a decision, and when you want it bad, you get it bad. Yeah. And so they helped her make sure it was a good decision. She didn't, and she was trusting the Lord and just said, nope, we're not going to medically retire him. Dr. Jordan's recommendation was not to do that just yet. In fact, Kevin Schaefer, the Navy lieutenant, the one Navy individual, Navy uniform survivor, Blanca, his wife, would medically retire him. Dr. Jordan would make that recommendation because there were some times that they actually had to paddle Kevin on his heart. He was close to death. I mean, we were all close to death, but Kevin was at that point that Dr. Jordan was, I might lose him. Dr. Jordan did think when all of us arrived, there's just a factoid for you, that of the 9 of us, he thought only 2 would survive.
Sure. I mean, looking at the
And
prospects of
yeah,
60%.
yeah, and 8 of us actually survived. And
God,
so the Lord
good
was with
testament.
Dr. Jordan, and yep,
Good
you know,
testament to the staff. God bless their hands.
yeah,
Speaking
yeah, he
of,
and Dr. Jang and the whole team, the whole team of folks that at the Washington Hospital Center Burn Unit, Katie and nurse practitioner and all that whole team, just
well,
incredible amount of people.
your story, Randy Norfleet's a buddy of mine. Do you know him by chance?
I don't think so. No.
I need to get you two hooked up. He survived Oklahoma City.
Oh, he did. Yeah.
Yeah. So when the explosion happened, he had just walked around the desk where the phone rang. He was on it trying to call headquarters. The phone rang. He answered it and said, Captain Guzman. He goes, "Oh, stand by for a sec." Puts the guy on hold. The two of them do a round 180. Guzman sits down, hits the phone. The bomb blows up. And he had parked right in front of McVeigh's truck.
Yeah.
So when he
Wow.
was upstairs, it blew him through the doorway and into the hallway up against the wall. And that whole section where he was had collapsed.
So by being blown to the wall, it saved his life.
Blown through the doorway. Had he
Wow.
been a wall there, he would have hit the wall and then collapsed with everything else. He went through the door and survived. Yeah, I
Wow.
need to get you two hooked up. And then
Yeah.
the other guy, when you go up to DC, have you met Ronnie Jackson?
Are you talking about the congressman?
Yeah.
No, I've not met. I knew he was the White House doctor. In fact, I knew his predecessor, Dick, President Bush's doctor, Dick Butt or
Mhm.
Butts, I think it was. But no, I've not met Congressman Jackson. So.
I got to get you hooked up with him. Ronnie and I were running buddies in Iraq, and
Oh yeah.
so if you got blown up or burned, that's the guy you wanted working on you. And
Yeah.
I was I
Yeah.
was I was telling you, every Memorial Day I put out a message about what Memorial Day means to me, and there was one.
Yeah.
It was sad. It was like your incident. There was one incident where we had 4 Army guys. Their vehicle had gotten blown up with a particularly nasty IED
Yeah. The copper
concoction.
penetrators. Yeah.
And so these guys come off the ambulance, and the smell of the burned flesh and no ears and nose and guttural sounds and the skin.
Yeah.
I don't have
Yeah.
nightmares about it, but
Yeah.
when I think about my time in Iraq, that's what
Yeah.
I think about. And so Christmas
Yeah.
one year, went down to Emcee. I had a layover in Emcee on Christmas Day, so I brought my dress blues. I went to go see all the Army and Marines that were in there and gave the families gift cards that we'd raised a couple $1,000. And we
Yeah.
gave out gift cards for them to go buy whatever they wanted at Walmart. And those guys, we saw from the very beginning, like if you got wounded in Iraq, you went to Balad, and then from Balad, Lambstool, and they just rotated a crew and flew all the way
Yeah.
directly to San Antonio. And
Yeah.
24 hours later, you may be burned in Iraq, but you are now in a bid. So the incredible life-saving and the technology
Yeah.
I witnessed was phenomenal compared to when my grandfather was in World War II or Korea and dealing with guys. None of them would have made it,
Yeah.
with your wounds.
I've got to meet Dave Reaver, the gentleman from the Vietnam War that White Phosphorus grenade blows up in his hand, and
Swift boats, right?
yeah, the Swift. You mentioned something a moment ago, Mitch, that I wanted to tag on to, and that is there was a period of time at Georgetown that I'm in their ICU. Now, Georgetown's ICU is cardiac. That's what the hospital. What keeps hospitals financially afloat is the outpatients of people coming in from the suburbs for various procedures.
Mm-hmm.
And so Georgetown specializes in, cathetering and various, so their ICU is all heart. So when Dr. Williams finishes with me, and it takes a couple hours, and I wasn't sitting there I was unconscious. I don't
Mm-hmm.
wake up for about a day and a half, but they actually put me in the cardiac ICU because it's the only ICU facility they have. And when Mel gets to Georgetown, and you talked about the smell, when Mel gets to Georgetown and she meets one of the nurses, Deb Trishell is a nurse at Georgetown in the cardiac that she had transferred. Again, this is just one of the Lord's things here. She had transferred from the Washington Hospital Center. She had worked burns, but she now wanted to change, specialties and be a heart nurse. Because look, burn nursing is tough because it's so visual. So Deb Trishell is my nurse in the ICU because she knows how to deal with burn patients. But here's the seminal part that Mel gets there, sees the priest. I can't remember the name of the priest's name, but she takes a moment to get herself gathered, has a prayer with the priest, and then goes in. And when she there's those double doors that are, you get to the nurse's station, and then and she says, when you open the double doors, even though I'm the only patient in there, it smells like a gas station. And when she comes into my room, I mean, the smells just, because
it's overpowering.
Even though I've been scraped of all the charred, it's just, the smell permeates the body, and it permeates the bandages. I mean, she said, I'm wrapped like a mummy and my head is the size of a basketball.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible how that doesn't go away. And
that smells. Mel she will, just like I remember that mask going over my face. Yeah, she'll always remember the smell, whether it was at Georgetown or the Washington Hospital Center.
Yeah. Well, you've definitely survived something. You and Dave Reaver. I know Dave. He's from up in my area here. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I had one day where we came in from Colorado Springs. We landed at DFW. We got to fly back out and head to Albuquerque, or maybe it was vice versa, Albuquerque and then Colorado Springs. And the line of weather, the airplanes are stacked up, and somehow they open it up. We got out, but when I go on the airplane, I always walk back and do I have any veterans on board? Blah 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 blah, and I do my little welcome aboard speech. Well, I see Dave sitting there, and I know Dave from Skyball and all the other veterans events that we have in the area.
Skyball, all that,
Yes, sir. And I walk up to Dave and I stick my hand out and I'm like, Dave, Taco. And he's like, ow, God bless you. You're my captain. All right. It was so funny. But I told everybody on the airplane, I go, I promise you this. We're going to go through a line of weather. It would be the worst you've ever had, turbulence. But once we get through the other side, it'll be crystal clear and nice and smooth. And so we did. We had the worst turbulence I've ever had. Yeah. We get through the other side, just poof. And it was like, wow, this is good. Ding. Yeah. Seatbelt sign off. But Dave's wounds and his testament to survival, you're the third person I know personally, outside of the war, who have experienced this. And Bobby Herline, do you know him by chance? He's a comedian, Army guy. Yeah. He has embraced his burns. Now his burns all over. And what's weird is after the initial shock of the burns, when you're with them, you just never see that anymore. And it's just a phenomenal thing to be looking at somebody and talking to him and laughing and having a good time. And he's making you laugh. Like he'd sit there at dinner and he goes, it's just out of the blue. He's sitting there eating. He goes, when I die, if my wife doesn't get a discount on my cremation, something's wrong. I'm like,
speaking of which,
dude, I can't believe
I've got, where is it? I've got I won't try to pull it up, but I've the sense of humor, I used to not have one before September 11th, because I was wrapped a little, when you're on active duty, you're wrapped a little too tight,
Sure.
You know the deal. And got a flyer from it's a funeral pre-planning group.
Right.
And it says, have you considered the benefits of pre-planning your funeral? Have you thought about the advantages of cremation? And of course, my response is, no, I tried that once and it really stuck, and, and, and then, and here in Granbury, so they say, we're doing a little, an information seminar, and we've got a little restaurant here with a community room. And I kid you not, I am not teasing you, Todd. I did not make this up. Okay. I can pull the flyer out, but it says, we're having an informational seminar at Flames Bar and Grill. And
Flames Bar and Grill.
There is a sick individual on the other end of this mailer, but yeah, it's, the Lord's blessed us in so many ways. I mean, look, the scars that we wear now will have as a recognition of the price of our earthly freedom for this great nation.
Yes, sir.
But someday, I won't have these, Mitch, because, when Christ encountered with Thomas after resurrection and being in his glorified body, Christ is still wearing those scars from the crucifixion on his glorified body. And we'll see those in eternity as a reminder for all eternity of our eternal freedom that he bought for us on the cross.
Yeah.
And so that's why we don't hide our scars. It's I don't know how to say it any other way. I mean, I'm not ashamed of my scars. I mean, it's, I see the guys that are missing a leg, missing an arm, Congressman Crenshaw missing an eye. I've got serious burns. Fortunately, they were, not most. I mean, you can tell my forehead's grafted and the eye socket.
Really, you look really good, and in person you look really good. So they've done just a phenomenal job.
But ultimately, those things are all, they'll pass away, but our eternity's forever. And I'm just glad the Lord thought we were worth it to wear the scars he's wearing for us to be with him in eternity.
Well, God bless you. You're doing great stuff for the U.S., for the state of Texas. By God, Hey, so what political stuff do you have going on your plate that you want to maybe talk about?
Well, the interim, we have a quote part-time legislature, but it's not part-time work. We're only gathered formally in a part-time status. But I chair natural resources, economic development. So there's stuff we're working there. And right now we certainly need to, with the weather warnings we've had for the high temperatures, we do need to have more power generation. It's not that the grid is broken. It's that the growth in Texas has consumed that spare, the growth in people, demand for power. For every house that gets built, every H-E-B or Kroger or strip mall that gets built, It's got to plug in. We've got to have more power generation. Our market is structured in a way that, and I don't want to bore people with all the unique things that the cogs that play a role here, but we need more gas, more coal. Obviously, coal, the federal government shut down. Gas is not viewed friendly by this administration, and with the tax abatements that wind and solar get federally, they can build and be profitable in a negative market price, and that's just not easy to compete with.
Why don't we build more nuclear stations? I mean, we've got one right down by you guys.
Yeah, but that investment is a 40-year mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
And the difficulty is that with a federal government that is hostile to nuclear, hostile to coal, frankly, even hostile to gas, what company, because look, the state doesn't own Comanche Peak. The state doesn't own any gas or coal-fired plants.
Mm-hmm.
But the NEPA, the National Environmental Protection Act, that requires the environmental impact statements, the licensing it takes to get a nuclear plant takes decades.
Yeah, but didn't the Supreme Court knock down the EPA's ability to?
They just did now and said Congress, you cannot. It says Congress has to determine this.
Sure.
Now that only happened 2 weeks ago. and
a
hopefully
department.
that's gonna help break some of this log jam up, where just because EPA says it ought to happen doesn't mean it should happen. If Congress, if you want to adopt a Green New Deal, you got to do it. The president can't do it of his own accord, and the
Yeah.
bureaucracy can't do it. So that was a great decision. It's great to have a Supreme Court that can finally read English,
Right.
is my view. But it's made the marketplace before that decision, it's made the marketplace extremely difficult to operate in because wind and solar get all the federal subsidies. So we're going to have to see how this plays out. So there's certainly some work I've got to do there. I'm also on the border security. What's happening, Mitch, is not incompetence with our border. It is malicious malfeasance.
Yeah.
There's no other way to say it. We are on pace. Governor Abbott said it a couple of days ago, but we're on pace. Even if the Remain in Mexico policy stays in place, but Title 42 goes away, we're on pace to bring in, during the Biden administration's 4 years, a city the size of Houston. Yeah. If he gets rid of the Remain in Mexico policy, we're going to bring in, or he is going to allow, this administration will allow a city of Houston every year for the remaining years of the Biden administration to come into the country.
Well, I heard that he was trucking people, catching and then putting them on a bus and taking them right back to the border and kicking them out.
That's what the governor has directed DPS and our military forces to do. But functionally, that's still taking people to the border patrol. Mm-hmm. But instead of the border patrol meeting us where we have people, and then the border patrol giving them to ICE, somewhere in Ozona or wherever those link up points are, he's now instructed to give them to the border patrol at the actual border crossings. The border patrol is still not going to deport them. The border patrol is still going to hand them to ICE. Mm-hmm. Maybe some people will self-deport, but we're still running buses to DC as well. But the bottom line is that the authorities that the state has versus what the federal government has as it relates to immigration and immigration enforcement we are basically in the analogy would be we're in a baseball game with the federal government, and when we go to bat, we only get to bunt, and that sucks.
Yeah, it does.
The other things we're working is just a few weeks back we had our hearings related to what happened with the school shooting in Uvalde. Mm-hmm. Tragic. But I don't want to see our Second Amendment rights, the right to self-preservation, because that's what the Second Amendment's about. Yeah, I don't want to see those impacted.
See, what drives me nuts about that is you identify the whack jobs, bring back some mental asylums or something, because all those people and all those shootings have all been identified. The red flags of, hey, that guy is probably most likely going to grow up to be a school shooter. And then, Look, the problem with red flag laws, though, is they're a gross violation of the Fourth and Fifth Amendment due process standard. It says you have to be accused of the crime. We're not in a situation, there are, I guess it's the word profiling might be the word that you're using. It's not that I want the crime to occur. Yeah. But when you look at the abuses that this FBI made, you look at the abuses that are being done in courts look, what happened at the Capitol on January 6th was not something to glorify. But when you've got people still sitting in jails being sentenced to long sentences for functionally walking through the Capitol that day. Right. And Antifa members who burned down federal buildings in the West Coast get a slap on the hand and don't even get arrested.
You watch Minneapolis burn. When Dan Bongino gets assaulted leaving the White House during the national convention was done, the national. You see a two-tiered justice system. You look at what's happening with the January 6th Commission right now. That committee is not allowing any opposing testimony. We are living George Orwell's 1984 right now. And if you think I'm going to trust either the federal government or the state government, to not take us down the George Orwell path that we have already descended, I'm not going to trust that.
Well, come November, everybody vote. We get all these guys out of there. Maybe we'll hear about Hunter Biden's laptop and the actual deal and get Biden impeached. I mean, I'm all about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Um,
mean, if a Trump child had done that, you'd have been hearing it, like we heard about all the debunked Russian collusion crap.
yeah. What
Or
about deaf?
should I say it more senatorially? The fecal excrement of the Trump Russian collusion hoax. I mean,
What about deaf? Has that come up on your radar? The DEF, the additive that you have to put in to
oh no, I've
diesel.
not. Yeah, for diesel, I know what it is, but I've not heard something on my radar that
Well,
I don't have no sense of context of what you're describing, Mitch.
okay, so all trucks, I want to say diesel trucks past 2010, EPA and those guys, they came out with this DEF additive, DEF, and it's made with urea that you get from Ukraine and Russia. And the other
Oh boy.
producer is India, and India is not exporting it. So this stuff requires, you have to put it in with so much, and then it uses it in some sort of like catalytic converter deal to turn the diesel exhaust into fairy dust. And if you don't use this stuff, your motor's governed to like 40 miles an hour. So if all of this stuff is going to come to a head in the next few months, where's the supply of the DEF? And
Yeah.
will there be enough for the truckers to be able to interstate commerce? So might be something that you want to look at, DEF.
Yeah. I just took my, a good staff officer always has something to write on and something to write with, if you remember.
Yes, sir.
And I just made the note because I'll need to visit with the TCEQ folks, and because look, the West Virginia case, all of us are in near non-attainment or near non-attainment. It seems like every time that we get close, when Governor Perry was in office, we were able, there were a number of things that we were making better air. We were keeping our air clean. And it seems like every time you meet the standard, the EPA change, it's the ratchet of,
change the goalpost, move it.
Yeah, they move the goalposts. And look, that's why I do not trust our federal government.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the two-tier justice system we have right now. You look at, who gets prosecuted and who doesn't. We're now enforcing the law based upon personality. Like with Hunter's laptop, and trust in the media, it's at zero. I mean, but I think like Dan Bongino says, we're poised for a comeback. And I don't mean, look, if Republicans win both in 22 and 24, we'd better deliver big muscle movements like what we've tried to do in Texas with property taxes, Second Amendment, not playing small ball here.
Well, I think even in Texas, I mean, we were just a shade away from fake Beto coming in with all the outside money that he had to turn this place blue. I was in a restaurant. Now, normally I wouldn't interject, but maybe I probably would just because it's me. But these two ladies were talking about how great it was. They moved out from San Diego. The other lady from Los Angeles. They were friends. They bought these big houses. The taxes are low. This is great. The only thing wrong with this state is it's red. We need to change it to blue. And I lean forward. I go, excuse me, ma'am. I normally wouldn't interrupt your conversation, but the reason everything's good, like you just mentioned, is because we are red. So if you don't like it, move back to where you came from and turn your place weird and keep all the homeless out there and just keep doing what you're doing because you're doing a great job out there, but don't bring it to our streets. It's bad enough I go to Austin and see my daughter got early acceptance to UT and A&M. So we go to A&M first. She's walking around like, ooh, that boy's cute. No, that boy's cute. She's a very good looking young lady. And then my wife goes with her down to UT, and they're walking around homeless dude. The tour of the campus is, of course, right in the city. And as you're going through stuff, this homeless guy just drops trowel and goes to the bathroom. And Mom, I don't quite feel, all the homeless people around there. She goes, I don't feel safe here. I think A&M, I feel much safer. And so guess where our daughter and our money's going?
Yeah.
A&M, baby.
Yeah.
Not this,
Yeah.
but A&M. But
Yeah.
I mean, if Austin hadn't embraced the California lifestyle and policies, it would be a crap hole. It is a crap hole down there.
Yeah.
Houston
Well, you mentioned
is
you mentioned
bad.
the two. Yeah, you mentioned the two ladies at the restaurant. The former Collin County Judge Self, and I were having a conversation, and he said similar that he had heard, you know, and he's like, "Ma'am, if your deductive reasoning, skills were very good, you would. Isn't life great here? But we need to make it a blue state. Your deductive reasoning should say it's great here because it's a red state. You know, I mean."
I know Keith Self. Judge
Yeah.
Self is an awesome dude.
Yeah.
Just so
Yeah.
incredible. I love that guy.
You know, if you want to embrace the suck, go back to the suck.
You
know that term, don't you, Mitch?
Yeah,
You know,
I got it, man. Hey, you enjoy those high taxes that give you absolutely nothing, go back and enjoy it. And if you're listening to my podcast, I normally don't get political, but yes, I am being a little bit political because I pay my $5 a gallon in gas that 2 years ago cost me $1.89. Yeah, I'm a little upset with all the prices and everything that's going on.
Yeah.
So I'm not happy. So I hope that it's reflected in the election. But I'm just going to say, thank God that we have men like you in office and willing to put yourself on the line to take care of the rest of us. So,
well, thank you, Mitch. I greatly appreciate it. I appreciate your encouragement. The political arena can have its unpleasantries, I assure you.
Oh, yes, sir. I've had a couple people go, "Why don't you run for office? Do run for office." I'm like, no, I don't want to put my wife and kids through the negative campaigns, the crap that they can make up about you. I'm just not even going to, because I'd go up and punch the guy in the face next time I saw him. And that probably wouldn't be proper etiquette.
Yeah. Well, it may not be proper etiquette, but the spouses take it. It's very difficult to be a spouse of a candidate.
Sure. Oh,
and that's its own set of unpleasantries, and the Lord carried us through those too. But I'm enjoying the work. I enjoy the service, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a great story of the Lord's grace.
Yes, sir. Well, listen, hang on for 1 second, and I'll be right back with you. All right. Can't thank
Okay.
you enough, and I will be having lunch with you down in Granbury soon.
All right. I look forward to it.
Hold on 1 second, sir. Hey guys, I apologize if I got a little bit political there, but in the light of everything that's going on nowadays, maybe we all ought to be a little bit political and look past the media lies and figure out what can unify us to make us a better, more prosperous country and things that help. Let's get off this bandwagon, of stuff going on. It is just absolutely horrific. I wish we could go back 21 years where we had the unity after 9/11. But I tell you what, Senator Birdwell's story is inspiring. And when you meet him in person, if you get a chance to ever attend one of his rallies or meet him in person, go up and shake his hand, and you will just be blown away and amazed by his perseverance through adversity that he endured. So until I see you guys next week, adios, hasta luego, auf Wiedersehen, tschüss, sheshini, au revoir, domarigato gozaimasu, tando shinde akudasai, ciao, arrivederci, das vidania, I could say that, Nostrovia and Bovigjania. Take care. Bye-bye.